Sometimes the biggest mistake isn't pulling someone over. It's assuming you already know their story. The morning sun had barely climbed above the tree line when Monica Brooks eased her silver SUV into a quiet gas station just outside Richmond, Virginia. It was the kind of place thousands of drivers stopped every day without giving it a second thought. A few fuel pumps hummed softly. A delivery truck rolled past with fresh coffee supplies. Country music drifted through outdoor speakers while commuters grabbed breakfast sandwiches before heading to work. Monica glanced at the dashboard clock. She still had plenty of time before arriving at Fort Gregg-Adams, where she planned to meet her husband after weeks apart. She smiled to herself as she reached for her phone, reading one last text that simply said, "Drive safe. Can't wait to see you." She slipped the phone into her purse, stepped out of the SUV, and stretched after the 2-hour drive. Dressed in a navy blazer, jeans, and comfortable walking shoes, she blended into the morning crowd so completely that no one gave her a second look. That was something Monica had grown used to. She never introduced herself by her husband's title. She never expected special treatment. Years of military life had taught her that dignity was something you carried quietly, not something you announced. Inside the convenience store, she paid for her gas, thanked the cashier with a warm smile, and picked up a bottle of water before walking back outside. Everything about the morning felt ordinary, almost peaceful. Then a patrol cruiser rolled slowly into the parking lot. A second one followed less than 30 seconds later. Officer Ethan Walker stepped out first, scanning the lot with practiced confidence before his attention settled on Monica. Beside him, Officer Ryan Collins adjusted his radio and exchanged a quick glance with his partner. Neither officer smiled. Neither one looked particularly concerned. Yet something in the way they changed direction toward Monica caused several customers to pause without fully understanding why. Monica noticed them approaching and offered the same polite expression she gave everyone she met. "Good morning, officers," she said calmly. Walker didn't return the greeting. "Ma'am, we'd like to ask you a few questions." His tone was flat enough to make nearby conversations fade into silence. Monica nodded without hesitation. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Before either officer answered, a woman filling her minivan glanced over with quiet curiosity. A construction worker stopped pumping diesel into his pickup. Someone near the entrance instinctively reached for a phone, sensing that an ordinary morning had suddenly become something people would remember. Monica remained perfectly still, her hands visible, her posture relaxed, her voice steady. She had learned long ago that staying calm often helped tense situations settle more quickly. What she didn't know was that this conversation was only seconds away from changing the lives of everyone standing in that parking lot. Because the assumptions forming inside those patrol cars had already written a story about her before anyone had asked a single meaningful question. And sometimes, the most dangerous judgment isn't spoken out loud. It's the one made in silence. Officer Ethan Walker stopped a few feet from Monica and studied her with an expression that never quite reached curiosity. It looked more like certainty, as though he had already decided how this conversation would end. Officer Ryan Collins stood slightly behind him, quietly watching the growing circle of onlookers. "May we see your identification, please?" Walker asked. Monica nodded without hesitation. "Certainly." She reached slowly into her purse, removed her driver's license, and handed it over with both hands clearly visible. Walker glanced at the card for only a moment before looking back at her instead of reading the information carefully. "Is this your vehicle?" he asked. "Yes, it is." "How long have you been here?" "About 10 minutes. I stopped for fuel and a bottle of water before continuing my trip." Her answers were calm, direct, and respectful. She never raised her voice. She never challenged the questions. Around them, the usual rhythm of the gas station had begun to change. Customers who had been preparing to leave remained beside their vehicles. A father carrying coffee paused near the entrance. Even the cashier inside the convenience store looked through the front window with growing concern. Walker walked around the sport utility vehicle, studying it from every angle. Collins quietly spoke into his shoulder radio before joining him near the driver's side door. Monica stood exactly where she had been asked to stand, waiting patiently. Minutes passed. The silence became heavier than the questions themselves. Finally, Walker returned. "Would you mind telling us where you are headed today?" Monica answered with the same steady voice. "I am driving to Fort Gregg-Adams to meet my husband." Walker's expression did not change. Is he expecting you? Yes. Does he work there? Monica smiled politely. Yes, he does. Walker exchanged another brief glance with Collins, one that suggested neither of them believed the conversation was complete. Instead of ending the stop, the questions became increasingly personal while revealing very little about why she had been approached in the first place. Monica remained composed, although she quietly wondered what had prompted this unexpected encounter. She had traveled this route many times before without incident. She knew every exit, every rest area, and nearly every gas station along the highway. Nothing about this morning had seemed unusual until the patrol cars appeared. A teenage employee walked outside carrying a box of windshield washer fluid and hesitated before stocking the display. Linda Carter, the station manager, recognized Monica from several previous visits over the past year. She remembered her as someone who always smiled, always thanked the staff, and always cleaned up after herself before leaving. Linda took a cautious step toward the officers. "Excuse me," she said politely. "She has been here several times before. There has never been any problem." Walker acknowledged the comment with a brief nod, but continued focusing entirely on Monica. The atmosphere grew noticeably quieter. Even passing traffic seemed distant now. A customer standing near Pump 4 discreetly began recording with a cell phone, not because anyone was shouting, but because something about the imbalance of the moment felt impossible to ignore. Monica noticed the phone, but paid it little attention. She folded her hands calmly in front of her and looked directly at the officers. Then, with remarkable composure, she spoke a single sentence that seemed ordinary at first, yet would soon carry far more weight than anyone present could have imagined. "I hope every detail of today is documented accurately," she said softly, "because the truth always matters in the end." Monica's words lingered in the morning air long after she finished speaking. They were not loud enough to command attention, yet somehow everyone nearby seemed to hear them. Officer Ethan Walker slipped her driver's license into his notebook instead of returning it immediately. "You can wait right here," he said. Monica gave a small nod. "That is exactly what I have been doing." The exchange was polite, almost ordinary on the surface, but an unmistakable tension had settled over the parking lot. People were no longer pretending not to watch. The construction worker leaned against his truck without starting the engine. The father carrying 2 cups of coffee quietly guided his young daughter closer to the sidewalk, keeping a respectful distance while remaining within sight. Linda Carter stood just outside the convenience store entrance, uncertain whether stepping in would help or make matters worse. She had managed this station for almost 12 years and had seen countless routine traffic stops nearby. This one felt different. Not because anyone was shouting. Not because anyone appeared frightened. It felt different because the longer it continued, the harder it became to understand why it was continuing at all. Officer Ryan Collins walked back toward the patrol cruiser and spoke softly into the radio. His voice could not be heard clearly, but the response crackling through the speaker was enough to draw Walker's attention. The 2 officers exchanged another quiet conversation before Walker returned to Monica. "Do you have anyone we can contact to verify where you are headed?" he asked. Monica answered without hesitation. "Yes." She glanced toward her purse, still resting inside the front seat of her sport utility vehicle. "My phone is inside my bag." Walker looked toward the vehicle before replying. "Please remain where you are for now." Monica simply nodded again. She understood that becoming frustrated would solve nothing. Years spent supporting a military family had taught her patience under pressure. She had attended ceremonies, deployments, reunions, and official events where discipline mattered more than emotion. Even now, standing in the middle of a gas station surrounded by strangers, she carried herself with the same quiet confidence. Linda finally gathered enough courage to walk several steps closer. "Officer," she said respectfully, "our security cameras have recorded everything since she arrived. She came in, paid for her gas, bought water, and thanked my cashier before walking back outside." Walker acknowledged her with a brief glance. "Thank you, ma'am. We will review anything necessary if needed." Linda nodded, but she noticed that her explanation did not seem to change the direction of the conversation. Nearby, another customer lowered his phone after recording several minutes of video. "This does not make much sense," he quietly murmured to the woman beside him. She answered just as softly, "Maybe there is something we do not know." Monica heard neither comment directly, yet she could feel the uncertainty spreading through the crowd. She took a slow breath and looked toward the clear Virginia sky for only a moment before returning her attention to the officers. She thought about Marcus. By now, he would probably be finishing his morning briefing, expecting her arrival within the hour. She smiled faintly at the thought. Their plans for the afternoon were wonderfully ordinary. Lunch together, a walk across the base, dinner with close friends. Nothing about the day had suggested it would become memorable. Then, from inside Monica's purse, a familiar ringtone broke the silence. It rang once, then again, then a third time. Walker glanced toward the vehicle, but made no move to retrieve the phone. The ringing stopped. Less than 10 seconds later, it began again. This time it continued longer, echoing across the quiet parking lot until nearly every person standing there turned instinctively toward the unattended sport utility vehicle, wondering who would keep calling with such quiet determination. The persistent ringing finally stopped, leaving behind a silence that felt even louder than before. Officer Ethan Walker looked toward the sport utility vehicle once more, then back at Monica. "Who keeps calling?" he asked. Monica answered with the same measured tone she had maintained since the beginning. "Someone who is probably wondering why I have not arrived." Walker folded his arms. "Would you like to tell us who that is?" Monica met his eyes without the slightest hint of frustration. "I would prefer to answer that after I can access my phone." For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Even the breeze seemed to pause as if waiting for the next decision. Then Officer Ryan Collins approached carrying a small notepad. "Dispatch says there is nothing unusual connected to her vehicle registration," he quietly told Walker. "Everything comes back clean." Walker frowned slightly, clearly expecting a different answer. He glanced once more at Monica's driver's license before finally reading every line instead of only the name. "Monica Brooks," he murmured almost to himself. "Current address verified." Collins shrugged. "Nothing outstanding." Before either officer could continue, the ringtone echoed across the parking lot again. This time it did not stop after a few seconds. It continued steadily, filling the quiet space between the gas pumps. Linda Carter looked toward the vehicle, then back at Walker. "Officer," she said carefully, "if someone has been trying to reach her for several minutes, perhaps she should answer. It might clear up whatever misunderstanding brought everyone here." Walker hesitated. His confidence remained, but there was now the faintest trace of uncertainty beneath it. Finally, he nodded toward Collins. "Retrieve the phone." Collins opened the driver's door just enough to reach Monica's purse resting on the passenger seat. The phone screen illuminated the moment he picked it up. He stared at the display for an extra second before handing it to Walker instead of Monica. Walker glanced down, expecting nothing more than another ordinary incoming call. Instead, his expression changed almost imperceptibly. The caller identification did not display a personal nickname or a simple first name. It displayed an official military office line followed by the words "Executive Aide." The ringing continued. Walker looked from the screen to Monica. "Do you know this caller?" Monica answered quietly. "Yes." "Who is it?" "Captain James Reed. He serves on my husband's staff." Walker's voice became noticeably slower. "Your husband's staff?" Monica nodded once. "Yes." The call ended before anyone answered. Less than 5 seconds later, another notification appeared. This time it was a text message visible across the lock screen. It read, "Mrs. Brooks, the general has finished his briefing early. Please confirm that you are safe. We are becoming concerned after several unanswered calls." Collins leaned slightly closer without saying a word. Walker read the message again, this time more carefully than before. "General," he repeated. Monica remained composed. "Yes." Walker looked directly at her. "What general?" Monica answered without hesitation, her voice calm enough that it almost blended into the morning air. "General Marcus Brooks. My husband." Nobody reacted immediately. The words seemed to hang over the parking lot, as every person within earshot silently processed what had just been said. Walker lowered the phone only halfway. Collins stared at the screen as though expecting it to change. Linda Carter slowly covered her mouth with one hand. Even the customers who had been quietly observing from a distance sensed that something significant had shifted, although they still did not know the full story. Then the phone vibrated once more with a new message. Only 6 simple words appearing beneath the previous notification. "The convoy is departing now. Estimated arrival, 12 minutes." No one spoke for several long seconds. The only sound was the distant rush of traffic beyond the station and the soft buzz of the fuel pumps continuing their ordinary work, while nothing about the morning felt ordinary anymore. Officer Ethan Walker looked at the phone again, carefully reading every word on the screen as though hoping he had misunderstood it. Captain James Reed. Executive Aide. General Marcus Brooks. The names were clear, official, and impossible to dismiss as some elaborate misunderstanding. Walker slowly handed the phone back to Monica. For the first time since approaching her vehicle, his voice carried a trace of uncertainty. Mrs. Brooks, why did you not mention your husband earlier? Monica accepted the phone with a calm smile that revealed neither satisfaction nor resentment. Because you never asked who he was. You asked where I was going, and I answered honestly. I was on my way to meet my husband. Collins lowered his eyes for a brief moment. Looking back over the conversation in his mind, he realized she had answered every question directly. She had never argued. She had never avoided a single request. Every assumption had come from somewhere else. Linda Carter quietly exhaled, almost relieved that the mystery had finally begun to unfold. Several customers exchanged puzzled looks as whispers spread through the parking lot. Did she say General? One man asked softly. Another replied, that is what I heard. Monica unlocked her phone and immediately saw a long list of missed calls and messages. Before she could respond, another call arrived. This time she answered. Good morning, Captain Reed. Even through the speaker, the concern in his voice was unmistakable. Mrs. Brooks, thank goodness. We have been trying to reach you for nearly 15 minutes. Are you safe? Monica glanced briefly toward the officers before answering in the same composed tone she had maintained all morning. Yes, Captain. I am safe. There was a brief pause before Reed continued. The general became concerned when you stopped responding. He requested that we verify your location. We are approximately 10 minutes away. Monica smiled gently. There is no need to rush. Everything can be explained calmly. Reed answered immediately. Understood, ma'am. The general asked me to remind you that your safety comes before the schedule. The call ended, leaving behind another moment of silence. Walker looked toward Collins. But neither officer seemed certain what to say next. The confidence that had shaped the beginning of the encounter had gradually been replaced by careful restraint. It was not fear. It was the realization that they had entered a situation without fully understanding it. Across the parking lot, several people quietly returned their phones to their pockets, while others continued recording. They sensed that the most important part of the story had not happened yet. Monica slipped the phone back into her purse and looked at the officers with the same courtesy she had shown from the beginning. I appreciate your professionalism in keeping everyone safe, she said. I only hope we can finish this conversation with the same respect. Her words landed with surprising weight because they carried no accusation. They offered something far more difficult to ignore, grace. Just then, faint at first, but growing steadily louder, the sound of several approaching engines drifted across the morning air. Heads turned toward the entrance of the gas station. A line of dark government vehicles appeared in the distance, moving together with quiet precision. No flashing lights. No dramatic display. Just disciplined order. As the convoy approached the station entrance, the conversations around the parking lot stopped completely. Everyone instinctively understood that the next few minutes would reveal far more than anyone had expected when an ordinary morning stop had quietly begun. The convoy rolled into the gas station with quiet precision, each vehicle stopping in perfect sequence without a single unnecessary movement. There were no flashing emergency lights, no blaring sirens, and no dramatic display of authority. Instead, there was discipline, the kind that announced itself through calm confidence rather than noise. The lead vehicle came to a gentle stop near the entrance, followed by two black sport utility vehicles with government license plates. A uniformed Army captain stepped out first. Captain James Reed adjusted his service cap, surveyed the scene for only a moment, and then walked directly toward Monica. As he reached her, he stood at attention and offered a crisp salute. Before speaking, "Good morning, Mrs. Brooks. I apologize for the delay." Monica returned his warm smile with a slight nod. "Thank you, Captain. Everything is all right." Reed relaxed only slightly before looking toward officers Ethan Walker and Ryan Collins. His expression remained professional, neither confrontational nor emotional. "Gentlemen," he said politely, "General Brooks will be here in just a few moments." Walker acknowledged him with a quiet nod. We understand. It was the first time that morning his confidence sounded uncertain. Around the parking lot, conversations had disappeared entirely. Customers who had planned to leave remained exactly where they were. Linda Carter stood beside the convenience store entrance, watching the unfolding scene with disbelief. She had never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday morning would place her at the center of something that would be remembered for years. Less than a minute later, the rear passenger door of the final vehicle opened. General Marcus Brooks stepped onto the pavement wearing his Army service uniform with 4 silver stars displayed prominently on each shoulder. His posture reflected decades of leadership, but there was nothing theatrical about his presence. He did not hurry. He did not raise his voice. He simply walked toward Monica with calm purpose. When he reached her, his first concern was not the officers or the growing crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Monica smiled. "I am fine." The general looked into her eyes for a brief second, as if confirming the answer for himself, before quietly replying, "That is all I needed to hear." Only then did he turn toward the officers. Walker straightened instinctively. Collins did the same. General Brooks offered a respectful nod. "Good morning, officers." "Good morning, sir." Both men answered almost simultaneously. The general's voice remained even and composed. "I appreciate the work law enforcement performs every day. I also understand that misunderstandings can happen." He paused briefly before continuing. "For that reason, I would like this situation reviewed carefully and objectively." Walker nodded. "Yes, sir. I believe the truth serves everyone equally," the general said. "If there are body camera recordings, security footage, witness statements, or dispatch logs, I ask that they all be preserved exactly as they are." There was no accusation in his words. No demand for special treatment. Only a request for transparency. Captain Reed quietly stepped beside him and handed over a folder containing Monica's travel itinerary, visitor authorization for the military installation, and the official schedule showing that she had been expected on base that morning. Walker accepted the documents respectfully, scanning the first page before handing them back. Every detail matched Monica's explanation from the very beginning. Every answer she had given had been accurate. The realization settled over the officers with unmistakable clarity. Nothing about the facts had changed. Only their understanding of them had. Standing nearby, Linda looked toward the security cameras mounted beneath the station roof and softly said to herself, "The cameras saw everything." General Brooks heard the remark and nodded. "Then they will help everyone understand exactly what happened." For the first time since the encounter had begun, the weight hanging over the parking lot shifted from uncertainty to accountability, and everyone present understood that the next chapter would not be decided by assumptions, but by the complete record of the truth. Within the hour, additional supervisors from the local police department arrived at the gas station. Their vehicles parked quietly beside the patrol cars, and the atmosphere shifted once again, not because anyone expected confrontation, but because everyone understood that the situation now required careful review instead of quick conclusions. Sergeant Daniel Harper stepped forward after greeting General Brooks with a respectful handshake. "General, Mrs. Brooks, thank you for remaining here. We intend to understand exactly what happened." General Brooks nodded. "That is all we are asking." Harper turned to officers Ethan Walker and Ryan Collins. "Please preserve your body camera recordings immediately. Do not delete, edit, or discuss the footage until the review is complete." "Yes, Sergeant," both officers answered. Linda Carter was then asked whether the station's security cameras had captured the entire interaction. "Every minute," she replied. "Our system records the fuel pumps, the parking lot, and the store entrance. Nothing has been erased." Harper thanked her before requesting that a technician secure copies of every recording. Several customers who had remained at the station also volunteered to share the videos they had recorded on their phones. One by one, they stepped forward, not to accuse anyone, but because they believed every angle of the story deserved to be seen. Monica watched quietly as each person offered to help. She felt grateful, not because people had taken her side, but because they had chosen transparency over speculation. Captain James Reed stood beside General Brooks, reviewing the timeline already established through Monica's phone records and the military schedule. Every detail confirmed what she had calmly explained from the beginning. She had stopped for fuel. She had purchased a bottle of water. She had planned to continue directly to the installation. There were no missing pieces, only assumptions that had stretched an ordinary stop into an unnecessary ordeal. Sergeant Harper gathered everyone near the entrance of the convenience store. At this point, he said evenly, "We are not making conclusions. We are preserving facts." His words settled over the crowd with reassuring clarity. General Brooks offered a slight nod of approval. "That approach protects everyone involved," he said. Harper agreed. "Our responsibility is not simply enforcing the law. It is earning public confidence every single day." Walker remained unusually quiet. Watching technicians collect the video recordings, he replayed the morning in his own mind. Monica had answered every question respectfully. She had followed every instruction. She had never raised her voice or shown hostility. The facts had always been available. It was his interpretation of those facts that now weighed heavily on him. Collins appeared equally reflective, recognizing that small decisions made in moments of confidence could produce consequences far beyond what anyone expected. Nearby, Linda looked around the parking lot where strangers from completely different walks of life had chosen to stay because they believed the truth mattered. She realized the station no longer felt like the scene of a misunderstanding. It had become a place where character was quietly revealing itself. Before leaving to continue the formal review, General Brooks addressed Sergeant Harper one final time. "Please understand something important," he said. "I am not asking for different treatment because of my position. If my wife had been any other citizen, I would still hope the process would be exactly the same. Fair, complete, and based entirely on evidence." Harper met his eyes and answered without hesitation. "General, that is exactly the standard we intend to uphold." For the first time that morning, the tension gave way to something steadier than relief. It was accountability beginning its work, not through raised voices or displays of authority, but through the simple decision to let the complete truth speak before anyone else did. By early afternoon, the immediate questions had given way to careful reflection. The parking lot had slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but for the people who had witnessed the morning unfold, nothing about the day would ever feel completely ordinary again. Before leaving for the military installation, Monica thanked Linda Carter for speaking up when she believed something was not right. Linda smiled warmly. "I only told the truth," she said. Monica answered, "Sometimes that is the most important thing anyone can do." Nearby, Sergeant Daniel Harper approached Monica and General Brooks once more. "Mrs. Brooks," he began respectfully, "before you leave, I would like to apologize for the stress this situation caused. The review process will continue, but I wanted you to hear that from me personally." Monica looked at him for a moment before replying. "Sergeant, I appreciate that. My hope is not that someone loses a career. My hope is that someone gains a lesson." Harper nodded thoughtfully. "I believe we all have one to learn today." Walker and Collins stood several yards away, speaking quietly with another. "Supervisor." When the conversation ended, Walker walked toward Monica. His expression was noticeably different from the one he had worn that morning. The certainty that had shaped his first impression had been replaced by humility. "Mrs. Brooks," he said carefully, "I owe you an apology. I should have listened more carefully instead of assuming I already understood the situation." Monica accepted his words without interruption. When he finished, she answered gently, "Officer Walker, respect should never depend on who someone is married to, what title they hold, or where they are going. Every person deserves to be heard before conclusions are made." Walker lowered his eyes briefly. "You are right." Collins quietly added, "We will remember that." Monica looked at both officers with calm sincerity. "I hope you do. Because the next person you meet may not have someone arriving in a government convoy. They may not know anyone with influence. They may only have their voice. That should still be enough." The words settled over everyone standing nearby. General Brooks remained silent throughout the exchange, allowing Monica's message to stand on its own. He understood that leadership was sometimes demonstrated most clearly by knowing when not to speak. Captain James Reed observed the conversation from a respectful distance, recognizing that no formal statement could carry the same weight as simple honesty exchanged face to face. A few customers who had remained at the station quietly applauded, not because anyone had won, but because the conversation had ended with dignity instead of resentment. Linda noticed the young girl who had arrived earlier with her father looking curiously toward Monica. Monica smiled and waved gently. The little girl smiled back before asking her father, "Is everything okay now?" He placed a hand on her shoulder and answered softly, "I think everyone learned something important today." Monica heard the exchange and felt a quiet sense of peace. The morning had begun with strangers making assumptions about one another. It was ending with strangers choosing understanding instead. As she walked toward the waiting vehicle beside her husband, she glanced back at the gas station one last time. It looked exactly as it had a few hours earlier, yet somehow it felt different. Not because the buildings had changed, but because several hearts had. And sometimes the greatest victory is not proving who you are. It is reminding others that every person deserves fairness long before anyone learns their name. Several weeks later, the events of that ordinary Tuesday morning had become the subject of careful discussion inside the local police department. Not because anyone wanted to relive an uncomfortable moment, but because every organization grows strongest when it is willing to learn from its own experience. The review was completed using the body camera recordings, the security footage from the gas station, the dispatch logs, and the statements provided by everyone who had witnessed the encounter. Together, they created a complete timeline that matched the facts Monica Brooks had shared from the very beginning. The findings led to additional training focused on communication, active listening, and the importance of evaluating situations through evidence rather than assumptions. Sergeant Daniel Harper later addressed his officers during a department meeting. "Public trust is built one interaction at a time," he said. "Every conversation is an opportunity to demonstrate fairness, professionalism, and respect." His words remained posted on the briefing room wall long after the meeting ended. Officer Ethan Walker carried the experience with him as well. Months later, during another routine stop, he approached a driver differently than he once would have. He listened before speaking. He asked questions before reaching conclusions. When the interaction ended peacefully, he quietly realized that the lesson from the gas station had changed more than one morning. It had changed the officer he chose to become. Officer Ryan Collins often reflected on Monica's simple reminder that the next person might not have influence, connections, or anyone powerful waiting for them. That thought stayed with him every time he put on the uniform. Meanwhile, Monica and General Marcus Brooks returned to their daily lives without seeking interviews or public attention. Friends who asked about the incident usually received the same answer from Monica. "The important part is not what happened to me. The important part is what people choose to do after they learn from it." Captain James Reed occasionally smiled whenever he remembered the endless missed calls that morning, joking that he had never been happier to hear someone finally answer the phone. Linda Carter continued managing the same gas station, greeting customers with the same warm smile she always had, but she found herself paying closer attention whenever someone seemed uncomfortable or unheard. The little girl who had watched everything with her father carried home a different memory than anyone expected. She did not remember official vehicles or military uniforms. She remembered hearing adults apologize, forgive, and choose respect. For her, that became the story worth telling. As for General Brooks, he often repeated a lesson he had learned during decades of military service. "Authority may open a door," he would say, "but character decides what happens after you walk through it." Monica would simply smile because she knew the deepest truth had never been about military rank, official titles, or unexpected recognition. The real turning point had arrived long before anyone learned who she was. It began the moment she chose patience instead of anger, dignity instead of resentment, and truth instead of fear. Every person at that gas station left carrying something different. Some carried relief. Some carried humility. Others carried hope. Yet they all carried the same reminder that justice is strongest when it belongs equally to the unknown traveler, the neighborhood cashier, the young police officer, the decorated military leader, and every ordinary citizen in between. Because a badge can inspire respect, a uniform can symbolize service, and a title can reflect responsibility, but lasting honor is earned only when every human being is treated with fairness before anyone asks for a name, a position, or a story.